The House and Senate try overriding gubernatorial vetoes. The land transfer tax options days may be numbered, and a constitutional debate over shifting state money towards faster income tax refunds. Next.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Hello, I'm Kelly McCullen. House Democrats defeated a Republican-backed effort to override Governor Bev Perdue's veto of state legislation targeting the federal health care reform law. Both parties say the veto override effort makes a statement. House Republicans attempt to override House Bill 2 to exempt North Carolinians from being required to buy health insurance under federal law seem to be as much about states' rights as health care.
It's an issue of what is the power of the federal government over the states and of the people of the states. You have at issue here basically the federal mandate saying that citizens of North Carolina have to purchase a certain product.
I have heard time and time again the claim that anything the federal government does is presumed constitutional simply because they are the federal government. Nothing could be further from the truth.
A House majority did vote to override the governor's veto, but a two-thirds majority is required. Democrats were confident all week they could sustain the veto and said attempting to exempt North Carolina from federal law makes no sense.
Federal law supersedes state law, or at least it did the last time I took a civics course, and we cannot change the result of that law in this body. And pursuing this lawsuit is nothing but an exercise in futility that wastes resources for the state and wastes a lot of time in here.
The motion fails.
House Speaker Tom Tillis confirmed defeat this week, but by legislative maneuver that passed 112-0, the House reserves the right to revisit this veto override in the future. House Minority Leader Joe Hackney joins us now. How important is the gubernatorial veto right now to the Democratic agenda and what you want to get done?
Well, I think it's important to the tone of the session for two reasons. What we've seen so far in this session from the Republican majority are attacks on President Obama and his policies. We've seen attacks on the governor, which go on. And we've seen pretty extreme right-wing agendas on all sorts of subjects, charter schools, federal health care. We have a voter suppression bill coming, I understand. There's guns, there's vouchers, there's marriage, everything in the world except what the people want us to be doing, which is focusing on jobs and good education, improving education, not cutting or slashing education, but improving education.
I mean, do you see anywhere where the Republicans have violated any campaign promises? A lot of these bills match up what they said they would do if the voters hired them.
Well, I think it violates their central promise, which is to focus on jobs. They have not done that. So not only are we seeing not focusing on improving the job situation, but actually going the opposite direction. And as I said, focusing on these secondary issues, which are all indications are secondary to the people of North Carolina.
Do you see that as having to answer back to all the promises they made to their core constituents? That you do these bills up front, move them out of the way. We have a budget coming up in a few weeks, we're told. And
North Carolina is a middle-of-the-road mainstream state. We have lots of independents who vote either way depending on the extremism or the perceived extremism of whoever's in power. An extreme right-wing agenda is not where most of North Carolina wants this House and Senate to be going.
On some of the responses that you're getting when you're standing up and preserving Governor Perdue's veto of certain bills, are you seeing that more as defending yourself against House Republicans or against Senate Republicans and the leadership in that chamber?
Well, I think it's both. And we have a fairly diverse Democratic caucus. And when our members vote to not to override the governor's veto, some of them are voting on the policy of the issue at hand. Some of them are voting just to support our governor. And some are voting, frankly, to show the Republican majority in the House and Senate that they do share power in this state. They do not run the state alone. They must share power with the governor, with the Attorney General, with Judge Manning, with the judiciary, and with the House and Senate Democrats. And so they cannot just not consult us, not accept our amendments, not let us improve their bills, and then expect us to join with them to override a gubernatorial veto.
Minority Leader Hackney, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
House Democrats are promising a fight over a GOP bill to change the state's earned income tax credit. The proposal would end a practice where state income tax filers could receive tax rebate checks larger than the amount of state income taxes they incur. Supporters say qualifying filers' tax credit should match what they pay in. Opponents of the tax credit say the EITC offsets other taxes the poor pay, like sales and property taxes.
Earned income tax credit is an attempt to make our tax laws fairer by compensating working class families for their higher percentage of their income they pay in taxes.
The GOP tax credit bill would affect the 2011 tax year. Legislation defining when the State Department of Revenue must issue tax refunds clears the House and Senate. State law places a statute of limitations on tax refunds if they're not detected within a certain time. This proposal would eliminate that statute of limitations, and the state would issue a refund check when the need is discovered, regardless of time's passage. Governor Bev Perdue said this week she wants to borrow state money from certain accounts to speed the issuing of state income tax refunds. The governor wants to tap money collected by the Employment Security Commission and pay it back by June, but Republican leaders say it's unconstitutional to use ESC money for tax refunds because that money is collected for a specific purpose. The GOP says shifting the expected $100 million from the fund invites a lawsuit which could stop income tax checks from being mailed. Senate Republicans revived the vetoed Senate Bill 13 as a counteroffer. The bill lets the governor cut $400 million in current state spending. It also would shift incoming money away from job incentive funds into the general fund. The idea is to lessen next fiscal year's budget deficit. The governor vetoed the bill over the incentives money, but the GOP senators argued that the incoming incentives money offers the cash flow needed to write those fast income tax refunds. Senate Republicans say if the governor borrows those Employment Security Commission funds to speed up income tax refunds, a lawsuit will certainly follow that will halt all refunds because the move is unconstitutional. They say using money that would otherwise boost economic incentives funds is a better source of cash because it's what they call unencumbered. But they say they would have to make Senate Bill 13 the law to make that happen with the veto override, which they passed 3119, the first step.
We have those monies available for our governor to use. There is no constitutional violation by using them. My biggest and first concern is the Constitution.
Senate Democrats say the governor has her plan for getting income tax refund checks issued quickly, and Senate Bill 13 has nothing to do with it. They say she's simply temporarily using existing state money with all the money to be replenished.
I don't want to go through another period where every day I'm getting hundreds of phone calls from irate taxpayers because the state is holding on to their money.
But the Republicans say this is a constitutional issue and those principles can't be ignored for political expediency. They say using Employment Security Commission funds is necessary if the governor wants to shift money, and that's taking a legal risk.
In order to cash flow the state, they've got to have, they say, $490 million. $100 million of that is the Employment Security Commission money. Without that $100 million, they cannot cash flow the state, and people will not get their refunds.
But the Democrats say Senate GOP leaders would hurt job creation efforts statewide by redirecting money away from incentives funds and towards refunds.
We are trying to create jobs to speed up the recovery in North Carolina, and this, if we pass this motion, what we'll be saying to the governor is she can't use the funds that we've dedicated for economic development purposes, when she has identified other sources to ensure we refund taxpayers that don't jeopardize job creation.
Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger is in the studio tonight. You got the veto through 31-19. Now Speaker Tom Tillis says we won't even schedule it unless Joe Hackney and Governor Perdue signal a deal. Did you know that going in before you put that effort in?
Well, of course, we knew that there would be some issues in the House with reference to overriding the governor's veto, but we thought it was important for us to move forward with this simply because of the fact that the governor had come out just the day before with a plan to deal with tax refunds that was based on an unconstitutional provision. And it was our feeling that the key thing that we need to do is make sure folks get their tax refunds.
Do you think the general public would stand on its constitutional principles, as I reported, what Mr. Goolsbee was saying, or do they just want their check, and if it means bending those principles, it's worth it to get the money back in their pocket?
Make no mistake about it that getting the checks is the important thing. But at some point, folks have to understand that the people that are in government understand what the rules are and that they're not going to bend the rules. Because if you'll start bending the rules for a good result, pretty soon you're going to start bending the rules for other things. And if we don't comply with the rules, and our Constitution is our basic core document in terms of what things the state can do, what things the governor can do, what things the legislature can do. And so that's a critical thing. And remember, every one of us, when we take office, we put our hand on the Bible, we raise our right hand, and we swear that we will protect and defend the Constitution. And so it's something that is important, and I think the people, when they think about it, they understand it's important.
What have these vetoes done to the political climate of the legislature?
I think it's made it clear that from a philosophical standpoint, the Republican majority that was elected in November, representing the will of the people in North Carolina, has a different philosophy than the holdover Democrats. And I think that in some respects, those holdover Democrats are adjusting in some respects, and in some respects they are not adjusting as well.
We have former Speaker Hackney earlier on this program, and I asked him, when you're debating these issues, are you debating to your House Republicans or the Senate Republicans? And he says a little bit of both. The words are changing now. The rhetoric is changing. Do you expect it to be elevated as we enter the budget season? We're hearing words extreme and turning back the clock and all the terms that we tend to hear when the politics ramp up.
You know, majorities matter, and what we saw in the last election is the people of this state elect a significant majority of Republicans in both the House and the Senate. The rhetoric may be being elevated, but the elevation of the rhetoric is on the minority side, not on our side.
Mr. Berger, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
The Senate's bill lifting the cap on charter schools arrived in the House Education Committee with some changes this week. Now a 50 charter schools per year cap is in the bill, along with other changes. Supporters say the charter school issue is now bipartisan. Some skeptics are on the record worrying that charter schools could siphon resources away from traditional public schools and existing charter schools.
We're trying to get a bill that can get through the General Assembly with bipartisan support to get on with the main objective. Remember, the main objective is to raise the cap on charter schools. The bill does that, always did, and hopefully always will. That's the main purpose.
And I think a big fear is that we're going to have an abundance of charter schools that are just going to pop up. And how are we going to support financially those schools? And my concern is it's going to negatively impact great charter schools right now, and I think many of them are very concerned as well.
The House Education Committee resumes its work next week. The Senate gave final approval to an involuntary annexation moratorium this week. The House will now consider stopping many involuntary annexations until July 1st, 2012. Local governments could readjust their local budgets if a planned but now stalled involuntary annexation was part of its financial planning. The moratorium would take effect immediately and run through June 2012. The House passed a repeal of the land transfer tax option this week. That tax would be applied to real estate sales, but it's lost 23 consecutive local referenda. State law allows county governments an unlimited number of attempts to pass it, but the bill would stop the transfer tax from appearing on future ballots. Some House Republicans propose eliminating penalties for state health plan clients who use tobacco or way too much. Current health plan rules allow health plan clients to be shifted into a lower tier of health coverage for exceeding body mass index limits or who admit to tobacco use or fail tobacco use testing. The legislature has halted these provisions temporarily.
We need to remove these punishments out of the law and move to a system where we can incentivize people to live healthier lives and not simply punish people.
The penalties would be removed immediately if this bill passes. The state health plan's anti-smoking programs are untouched. Bipartisan House legislation could ban internet sweepstakes promoters from offering their products. The bill would ban the ownership of any sweepstakes terminals for use in awarding prizes or as a promotional tool. It would also outlaw making any effort to circumvent the law. The bill exempts the Cherokee Casino and subjects other violators elsewhere to felony charges. Other legislation has been filed that will legalize video gaming in North Carolina. The State Lottery Commission would oversee a profit-sharing operation with locally licensed vendors. The bill would block local governments from banning video game terminals through ordinances. Gaming operators would undergo background checks. The House Transportation Committee is weighing a trial run of speed detection cameras in school and work zones. Drivers would be photographed automatically if they exceed 11 miles per hour above the speed limit. The violator would then receive a $250 ticket in the mail, but no insurance or driver's license points.
It'll provide a much-needed revenue source for school technology, and it will help pay the state's obligation under the fines and forfeitures ruling, which is a $748 million judgment against the state, $18 million of which has been paid.
Representative Rick Glazier joins us to talk about the speed detection cameras. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
This bill, will it be more of a financial tool or will it be more of a safety tool?
It's really got aspects of both, but it has to start with safety. And we've looked at the data from the the accidents that occur in construction zones, and we've looked at school zone data. And there's an immense amount of data out showing, actually last year we had almost 2,000 accidents in construction zones in North Carolina, about 1,000 injuries, 15 deaths. We had large numbers of accidents in school zones. So the whole point as a starting point for this bill is to make those two areas safer for kids and safer for workers.
It makes it sound like you need people to speed in the work zones to raise the revenue because you're facing a $730-some-odd million payment to the public schools.
Well, the collateral sort of good second part of this is it will help us pay down over a course of years the judgment that the state has in the fines and forfeitures case, and the money will go, 75% of it, directly to schools for technology funds that aren't otherwise available. But you know, you sort of hope that the bill ends up in a point where you're getting less and less and less money, because that's the goal. I mean, the goal is to get people to stop speeding during those two zones. And if we have to go to another measure to raise money, I'll be the happiest guy in the world.
Are these cameras designed to be sneaky so you don't know they're out there?
Not at all. Actually, they are not designed that way, and there's a signage requirement in the bill that before you enter the zone, that you'll know on both sides of the street that there are speed cameras posted. And those 15 zones will be really clear. And they're obviously movable zones, but the signage will be wherever they are.
15 statewide at this point.
15 statewide at this point.
The ticket, you don't get driver's license points or insurance points, as I just reported. How does that differ that if you go through a zone, there's no camera, and the police officer stops you, writes you the ticket?
Then automatically the ticket trumps any civil penalty. There is no penalty or citation that issues off the camera, and the officer citation is what counts.
To pay off over $700 million, have you done any studies on how long that would take, how many tickets that would require?
An awful long time, but the goal, the bill as you saw has a 15-year sunset on it, and so the thought is that those 30 pilots may generate $6, $7, $8 million in the first year, and then we'll sort of see. So you can calculate it's not going to get deep into the judgment, but it is a significant amount each year, enough that the judgment will be brought down over time. And the other thing about a pilot is that's what it's scheduled for. We'll see if it works for safety purposes. We'll see if it works on the revenue side. If it's not, then we need to stop it and try something else.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you very much.
Some senators want blood work done on anyone criminally charged in vehicle death cases. It's Senate Bill 16 would require the police officer to perform that blood test, but it would not affect a pending court case should the blood test not be administered. The bill to allow concealed carrying of firearms in restaurants and park grounds was changed this week. First, restaurant owners could make their businesses weapons-free by posting signs. Second, bar owners have the right to question customers on possessing concealed weapons if they're ordering an alcoholic drink. Supporters say they want a less amended bill. We heard from both sides, though, including a domestic violence group opposed to more guns in public, even if those guns are legal.
We look forward to a clean bill passing. We're happy that parks are still included, of course, because there is a horrific crime problem in both municipal and state parks within the state of North Carolina.
We just tried to look at the statistics and say, is this going to help more women or harm more women? And we're obviously, our group is trying to advocate for protecting more women. So when looking at that balance, we think it's going to harm more women, and that's obviously our mission, so that's the position we took.
The House continues deliberation next week. A bill authorizing criminal charges for injuring or killing a pregnant woman's unborn child or fetus sits in a House Judiciary Subcommittee. Attackers could face life without parole for intentionally killing a woman's unborn or acting recklessly, where common sense says a pregnant woman is at risk. The bill explicitly exempts medical procedures. Speaker Pro Tem of the House, Representative Dale Folwell of Forsyth County, has supported this bill in past sessions. He's leading this effort during this legislative session. Representative Folwell, does this bill take a stance making a social statement, or are you targeting a criminal activity in North Carolina?
We are targeting a criminal activity in North Carolina. We're trying to put into law an option for district attorneys to charge people who harm and murder pregnant women in North Carolina. Now, what's ironic for the viewers is that this law already exists on the Blue Ridge Parkway and other federal property throughout the state. And it's a double standard to have someone who murders a pregnant woman on federal land to be charged with 2 crimes, but anywhere else in North Carolina only charged with 1.
Does the bill outline that a person has to be attacking a woman because she's pregnant to qualify for the double homicide charge?
Well, not because she's pregnant, but we know from recent news stories that many of the women in North Carolina who are being murdered are murdered because they're pregnant. We have the high-profile cases that we've all unfortunately heard about, but then we have those cases like Corinne Bennett at Shaw University, who called her boyfriend, told him she was pregnant. He said, "I'll be right over," and he ended the life of that student and her would-be child. The problem or the challenge as we go through with this is how do you advocate for the invisible? How do you advocate for the victims who are no longer here to speak for themselves?
If a cold-blooded murder in North Carolina will get you life without parole, in jail the rest of your life, what difference does it make whether you add 2 counts of that to a sentence?
That's a great question. What we try to do in Raleigh is actually introduce legislation that changes the behavior of what it is we're trying to fix. I can't sit here and tell you that that's going to happen. What I will tell you is that there should not be one set of laws that apply to the Blue Ridge Parkway and Fort Bragg, but then another set of laws that affect the rest of the people in North Carolina on this particular issue. The reason I'm so interested in this topic is that even though this bill is named after 1 child, it could be named after a number of different children who were killed in North Carolina. This whole process started almost 2 decades ago with Representative Esposito, and then picking up by former Representative Walland, and then Representative Starnes, and then Hilton, and then Steen and myself. And through all that time, all these families have ever asked for, because every year in North Carolina, more pregnant women are murdered. All these families have ever asked for from the North Carolina General Assembly and for their state government is a hearing on this bill. We're going to get a hearing this year and on the Unborn Victims Bill.
Representative Folwell, thanks for being on the show and explaining Ethen's law. We will be tracking that bill as it makes its way through the legislature.
Thank you.
The House approves stopping state regulations if those being regulated will incur a level of financial cost in complying. The bill was modified so only rules that carry a $500,000 impact statewide would be halted. Rules required for public safety or complying with federal law are exempt. The rule stoppage would last until July 1st, 2012. The bill sits in the Senate. The House passed a bill allowing a veteran's designation on driver's licenses and ID cards. Supporters say this makes sense because veterans are asked about their status a lot. The bill's lone opponent in the 115-1 vote says veterans organizations will be diminished because those membership cards are proof and a reason to join the club.
We've provided veterans preferences in the past regarding hunting license and other renewal of driver's license, et cetera, which are things well deserved for veterans for the service they give. This is of particular importance because, as we know, with the number of veterans returning, it can be of some difficulty for them to provide that status on the spur of a moment.
If you want to get veterans privileges and you don't carry your DD-214 with you to prove you're a veteran, then join a service organization.
The bill heads to the Senate. If you're online this week, look us up, make us your Facebook friend. You can find us at facebook.com/legweek. We are on Twitter. Our handle is @NCNlegweek. And of course, we love to hear your emails, legweek@unctv.org. And love to have you visit our website. It's full of videos and tweets, unctv.org/legweek. That's our show for this week. We'll see you next time.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.